son of a gun. Really would have preferred if it let me stay logged in from 2 devices. This would all be a lot easier for me.
Chris.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Dave? Anybody? Soren?
Yeah, I can hear you.
People are nodding their heads up and down.
Thanks.
Okay, somebody has to say something for me to hear you.
Okay, I'm saying something.
Okay, now that's much better. Okay. Thank you, Dave.
Do you want me to see if I turn it down? Is that really a problem? All right, we're 1 minute after, and we have a pretty full agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I will ask for a note taker, at least someone to join in on the IETF note-taking tool to help the chairs out.
I think I am on the tool. Are you on the tool?
I am not. I can't manage all of the things.
No. I just want to make sure if anybody. I'm on the note-taking tool that is in the IETF meeting page. It should allow other people to join if they have not. I'm going to try this tool one more time today. Thank you. Sorry, Chris.
Yep, no worries. And there's a nice little echo in the room. We're just going to live with that. All right. Note well. You should all be familiar with this. You agreed to this when you registered. This is not a full statement of all of your responsibilities. Those are in the BCPs listed. Please be aware of this and know that you agreed to it. I'm not supposed to interpret it for you. That's what the lawyers told us earlier in the week. Note really well, this is an IETF meeting. We try to create a positive environment here. It's about making technical things better, not about comments on people or things. Be nice to everyone. If you
Things? I'm mystified.
Yeah, and if you've been harassed.
But you can't explain it, so go ahead.
If you have been harassed, you can talk to your chair, friendly AD who just joined us, or the Ombuds team at IETF. So if you don't get, there are avenues for you to have that fixed if it might happen. Okay, meeting tips. Remote participants, please turn audio and video off unless you have comment or something to say. Join the mic queue, etc. In-person participants, both of you have already joined Meet Echo, so I'm going to be pretty sure you're already in and there's no queue for you to sign. It's pretty late in the meeting, but here's meeting help and agenda if you're looking for it. There's still one session after this, so you can find what you can do next. Okay, we made it through the kind of pro forma stuff. Chairs welcome. It'll take us hopefully 10 minutes. I'm going to go through doc status. That might take up a few minutes. We did the welcome. Thanks for those who attended both remote and in person. Get that. And now let's kind of go ahead and talk about draft status. So Um, okay, I'm not going to try and dive into these. These are just, we're going to touch on them really fast. Next thing on the agenda is actually milestones, so we can, beat these horses till they're dead in a minute. Um, internationalization is coming up to last call, I think. That's the sense I have. Interested in feedback on that, I think. And Zahed, you're in the room if you want to comment. I think we need another.
I just got a review from Christoph, and I responded to that, and it will be an 11. So at that point, I think it'll be the time for WGOC, but not now.
Fair. I'd also like to make sure that both Zahed, who I know has an interest in this, and the internationalization team has a chance to make sure that we're on the, doing the right thing before we fully last call it. Zahed?
Yeah, I think we have been doing like hourly review call for this I-18 team, and I have already talked with Barry Levy, so we actually could get a good reviewer who understands this technology rather than not like completely. So I think there is a history now behind us, so we need to learn from that and work on that one. So when you guys are ready with like, okay, it's ready from our point of view for an early review, so let me know. I'll try to find out somebody really interesting, and the team now knows. They will not like randomly assign somebody on it.
Okay, I think it's ready for an early review, but if you're talking about WGLC, you'll have to wait for 11 because I have the Christoph's review to deal with, and I will do that in the next few
Yeah,
weeks.
you do what you can and just let me know when we can send it. Okay.
A kind of other status here, we have a number of drafts that are submitted, working their way through the process. Not going to kind of go through them all. We have a bunch of individual drafts at this point that we have on the agenda to talk about, as well as a number of drafts. So this is not the only page of kind of active material. We have a number of individual drafts. I would ask kindly if anyone can help take a look at this last one, the NFSV4 recursively setting. I did go through it. It's a rough draft at this point. It talks a lot about server-to-server copy a mechanism. So it's not one, but I haven't seen any activity related to that draft on the list. So I'm not exactly sure what to make of it. Okay. I do want to bring up interim meetings. I don't know if we're going to be able to or will decide any changes here. I would like to get a sense of folks if, kind of meeting times, what can we do to make them more productive, any other logistics we could fix. Brian and I are willing to kind of entertain any comments at the mic, and if necessary, happy to do some polls. Does anyone have kind of feedback? I know it's not necessarily the most convenient time for our European friends. I think it's maybe even a worse time for our friends in Asia. Maybe it really is just a West Coast, East Coast, U.S. So comments, should I run another poll on times? Or are people happy with kind of the current timing? Are you're heading to queue? Okay.
Well, all right.
Dave, Christoph's in queue, so
Go ahead.
if you want to go get in queue.
Yeah, so the time is a little suboptimal for me in Europe, but I'm honestly not too unhappy about because I'm not necessarily sure these frequent calls are that productive. I find mailing list discussion and reviews way more suited for most work. But if you continue doing these meetings, please publish agendas ahead of time and publish minutes so that I can join in if it really feels necessary and can read up what went on.
So I will say agendas are often pretty late. That is on me for sure, but they're also not necessarily detailed. So as far as agenda publishing, would more detail matter to you, or is the detail in there sufficient? I'll do a better job about getting them out
I
early.
have to admit, I've mostly ignored the detail level because I've usually only seen the agenda after the meeting already happened. At that point, I don't care anymore.
Fair enough. I do try to get them
Time
out.
zone differences, but I can take a look if the agendas look suitably. But I suspect that's not the problem.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you. Dave?
Well, I'm okay with it, but I can understand that are with what's been happening. But the real issue, which you can address, is basically attendance. So because we just have a few people, so that's not your problem, but it is a problem.
I mean, noted, and yes, I can't obviously force any volunteers to attend. So, Tom?
So one of the things I'd like to see is, the documents have appendices. The appendices have action items or consensus items. I'd like us to see in this meeting, we're going to track these X consensus items and then go do that in the meeting.
At least individual, chair hat off. I agree with you.
Yeah.
A chair hat on, I probably agree with you as well, to be honest. It would make a more efficient meeting and the chairs would be able to facilitate better. So,
Let's see.
Dave?
Well, do you need help from me in that, or are you going to take the initiative?
We can work with you on that, I think is the right version. We can take some initiative, but we can't do it on our own, in my opinion. Brian, any disagreement with that?
No, but let's not use Meet Echo.
Was that chair hat on or off? Either way. All right. So my read, summarizing the kind of comments I heard, if tighten up agenda, get them out earlier, focus on issues, that will make the interim meetings more productive. And, if that becomes the case and Christoph, it becomes, you find you want to join more and it's a time challenge, we'll visit that when we run into it. Does that reasonably summarize what I heard? I'm getting head nods in the room. If anybody disagrees with that summary, let me know. Jump in the mic queue. Okay, nothing heard. You can always send an email to the chairs or to the list if that's not the case. Okay, milestones. This is all the chair slides there are to start this topic. I am not seeding the discussion with what I think we should do, or what draft should get what priorities, or setting dates on anything at this point. I'm really looking for the working group to have some input here. I can scroll back to the list of drafts that are in our queue, at least kind of both individual and working group. I'm looking for some inputs here. We do have some things that are adopted. At a minimum, we should kind of figure out, are we committed to that? If we're committed to that, let's put some rough dates on those. And for the other set of things, we should put some version of when we're planning to when we think there's some work we roughly agree with. This is not a super tight contractual agreement here. Work we roughly agree with that the working group wants to tackle, I'd like to put those in, and maybe with some looser milestones. So mic queue is open. I'm interested in hearing feedback. One way or another, the chairs have to get milestones updated. It is one of the jobs of the chairs, and we do need to do the updates. And Christoph is on his way. We'll give him a minute to get to Mike.
Well, I mean, whatever we update the milestones to should probably reflect the work that's actually happening in the working group. And I mean, the primary action is on the mailing lists where we can see the hot topics, definitely echoes right now. Well, yeah, basically everything we've got on there. So the problem is that I think a lot of the work that's ongoing and not submitted and under evaluation is to some extent controversial. And I'm not sure we're doing us a service in updating any milestones until we've reached working group consensus on a number of issues. So, and I guess that puts you in a hard place because you're probably supposed to update the milestones as soon as possible. And I don't know when we will reach that consensus, but.
So I can say that our milestones are wildly out of date. It should come as a shock to no one. I think we have some near-term things. I don't know exactly if I, as an individual, not necessarily speaking as a chair at this point precisely, but as an individual, I don't know where I would put the line in the sand for when I think we could, finish ACLs at this point. We have some, I would say, we have some very active conversations on it. There are some different proposals, but I don't know how that's going to coalesce at this moment. But I think it's something we're going to bring across the finish line. I think we're going to bring internationalization across the finish line in the reasonably near term,
Yes.
and the rest become a lot more fuzzy
Yes.
for me from what I can observe.
That is my understanding.
As a chair now, I can work with those two and potentially write something a little less definite for some further out milestones, but I'm the part I'm really looking for as a chair feedback is we've got a lot of things proposed. Where do we see those? What, and they're of some drastically different scale of proposals. But yes, the chairs really do have to update the milestones. You're good, or shall I go on to David Black?
Yeah, let Dave.
I have a few things in my mind.
Okay,
So
David?
I'm gonna agree with something that I heard Christoph say, which is I think job one is to figure out what is the working group going to do, and possibly sorted into buckets on the order of I see a path to getting this done. We'll take more work likely to get done later, and oh good grief. And then start working the milestones from that initial what is work group going to do, and rough triage exercise. I got the AD right behind me, so I should probably yield to him. I will comment that particularly for the going to take some work and oh good grief ones, the milestones tend to be flexible. As the grand and glorious keeper of the TSVWG milestones for a while, they were routinely updated when the optimistic plans of mice and men ging to glee.
So Jahid, David, you have been a great chair in TSBWG, and you know what exactly that means. And perhaps you read my mind and said everything that I would like to say. so yeah. I mean, the thing is like milestone is something that we try to. I mean, it is tool to help us manage what we're doing, right? So you chairs and me just need to agree, like, okay, this is the thing that we are doing. So I think from that point of view, milestones is also not written something on the stone that once it's a milestone, we cannot change it. I can go ahead and delete all the milestone you have. So that's not a problem. It's more of like, what is your chairs and working groups view, like what we're doing right now and what we're going to do next. I also told you, like, I'm fine with reviewing the time in it, so that you have a list of the thing and you put a next and all these things. So that's, you can also take that advantage if you don't know like which is a timeline we're talking about, because sometimes the timelines are like just to indicate like where what's our target. And also, but think about like if this timeline, time, date, and time is actually helpful for the somebody who's implementing. Like somebody is releasing this thing, and they need to show somewhere like this is happening. Uh, that would be a nice thing to put on. Otherwise, I mean, list the things that you guys think like would be doing. I'll perhaps question like what are what, and then that's the explanation you need. So it's on you, on the working group chairs authority to pick up the milestone.
Thanks. Other comments? Does anybody want to make any kind of guesses as to, um, not that I am unwilling to draw a line in the sand, but is anyone else willing to take some guesses on ACLs or on internationalization? I mean, I feel like those are the ones that are more tangible. I don't know, Tom, flex file. I think there's still some hurdles to overcome, but I don't know if you have any feelings there. Be happy to hear what thoughts are. Christoph?
Yeah, so I mean, I think internationalization is definitely towards the finish line. I'm, as said in my review, not entirely happy with the document, which a lot of it is about the structure of the document, but the technical decisions in there, I made in there, I think, are very sound, and we should go forward with it. So basically, I think, and I don't remember anyone disagreeing with the technical decisions there. So I think we got consensus and we're moving forward. It's just wordsmithing in the broader sense. So that's probably the first milestone where we have consensus and we're confirmed to get done. But I think after that, it gets a lot more muddy. I mean, there seems to be a broad consensus that we need to do something about ECHLs, but I'm not sure we've reached complete consensus on what, except that it should involve significantly better support of draft POSIX ECHLs, which I think also seems to be a wide agreement. But after that, there's still a lot of discussion going on how we're going to do what in detail. But given the significance, given the pain ECHLs have caused in general and for Unix file system servers, I think that's actually an item that generates a lot of excitement and gets people motivated to actually get work done. So I think that's definitely up there on the milestone list. Well, then we got the famous BIS document, and I don't think we can not do a BIS document, but everything seems a bit muddy of what we're splitting out and what maintenance we're doing in there, and if this is the right place to actually add new attributes in a few cases. I think most have moved out, but Dave Novak will probably have all the details as the editor of the document. And yeah, after that, I don't really know what else is going on. I mean, Tom is going to talk about the new flex files today, so that will loop in somehow. The recursive set editor document you mentioned, I've never seen it before, and I couldn't find it on the working group email list archive either. So I don't even know where you heard about that.
It's in, if you go to the data tracker, it's at the bottom as an active draft
yeah. But I mean, unless the authors actually show up
I'm
on the
with you.
mailing list, at least, never mind in the working group meetings in person, I think we're safe to ignore it for now. I know I've been wanting to do a tiny little draft for a little more like SCSI and VME layout stuff, but that's not really on anyone's importance list, and it should be like 2 pages when I get it done and mostly fly under the radar. So I'm not sure that's worth it for a milestone. But yeah, I think we need to reach consensus on what we want to do with ECHLs, with security, the scope of the BIS document, and that should give us nice milestones because that's work that's been in progress forever.
Dave? Dave, you're muted, or at least we can't hear you. Nope.
Hey, this is Brian. Sorry to jump in. I had to log out and log back in, Chris, for audio. I lost it. Hope you heard that.
Brian, can you tell Dave we can hear?
I think we just lost him completely. Tom,
I'm here. David.
Dave, we can't hear you.
Oh, my machine's frozen now.
Dave, MeetEcho thinks you're muted.
Because I did that. All right. Anyway. All right. Yes. So as I said, the internationalization probably by IETF 121, and the point I think we need to address is security. I know there's some disagreements about that, but I think we need to. I think that's in a pretty good shape, and I think we need to just make clear if there are disagreements, what they are, and try to resolve them. I think I've heard some stuff, but it never really amounts to this is wrong or fix this. I think we need more specificities. Specificity there about that. Okay, that's it.
Okay, I'm flying blind while I reconnect. So, Tom?
Yeah, so you'd asked me about the flex valves V2. So it's, I'm presenting today to iron out some issues I think the working group will have with it. As for when it's ready, it's probably a year out, a year and a half. I mean, it's, you talked earlier about something being rough. This is rougher than that. So.
Okay, I don't know who's in queue. Brian, help me manage this while I hope for some laptop to reconnect.
There's no one in queue.
Okay. Come on in. You can at least have a seat. There's space.
Hey,
Okay.
Chris, I'm managing it from my phone. It's a little bit different UI. I'll keep an eye on the queue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm booting back up. So this is kind of what I've heard so far. If I were picking dates, I'd put internationalization at the end of the year. I'd give ACLs about 18 months. You, Tom, just said flex 12 to 18 months. I guess I'd give, ACLs I'd probably give about 18 months. Christoph, maybe I'll make a milestone. I don't have a good answer to that at the moment. That's probably okay. I might put a milestone in there, and we'll just be flexible. And we can drop it if you say, hey, drop it. Security, Dave, I heard what you said. I'm not really sure what to make of that because I feel like consensus is still rough. Uh, and honestly, we're still struggling with the adoption call at the moment. So, um, and I think BIS is also going to be a ways out. At a minimum, I'd give BIS 24 months. Uh, I mean, at a minimum, I don't. I wish I had a crystal ball for that. I do not. Objections to what I just said? Dave, if we really want a security milestone, we could put a security milestone in there, but I'd probably also put it out 18 to 24 months and we can refine as we go. Does that work?
Longer than I'd hoped, but it's probably realistic.
Well, I think any standard is pretty much further than anyone hopes, but if you can fix that, we need to have there's a lot of people who want to have that talk. All right. The chairs made note of this. I have some rough notes here on paper at a minimum. There also should be in the note-taking tool. Look and said we'll send you milestone updates in a week or so. Okay, that brings us to. I went too far. That brings us to the internationalization draft. And Dave, you don't just give us
Wait
a
a
quick.
minute.
Okay, sorry.
Wait a minute. You have three slots for here, and I've only requested two, and I don't have a set of slides for internationalization.
I'm not looking for slides. This is any kind of comments. I know Dave, but it's a document that's getting close to a working group last call. I put a time slot in it for it anyway. So is there any updates for the working group? I know we just got an review from Christoph on list. Is there any other things we need to update on? Otherwise, we're just going to move ahead to Tom.
Well, just what I've always said, that I will respond to that. And as Christoph said, there's some structural issues, and I think I will address those. And we haven't had any disagreements on technical matters, so that's why I don't see this taking 15 minutes. So
That's good because I think we went over time on the milestone conversation, which I anticipated, but I didn't have a solution to. I'll also note that I've heard comments that some just actual editing, text editing help would be beneficial here. I'm interested to know if anybody is interested to kind of help just work through text, not necessarily structural change, etc. Christoph.
So, I mean, first note, we actually started just on time. You used exactly your 30 minutes you had for your two items, so we're perfectly in time right now. So I've enjoyed working with the Markdown-based process for my NVMe draft. So I'm definitely available for a bit of editing and work. We want to change control, at least for smaller drafts. I don't want to get anywhere near the base document, to be honest. One issue that I raised in my internationalization review, which is actually broader than just that draft, which might be a good use of the in-person time here or the on-call time, is the issue when we do these split out documents like internationalization security. I don't think ECHL would go there, but who knows? Is right now the document tries to update 4.0 and 4.1 documents, which I don't think is a good idea, but I don't know if my opinion is consensus in the working group. Because in the end, 4.0 and 4.1 are very different documents, and trying to update them in the same document and starting from the different baselines is in general a bad idea. And I also don't think that working on a very much obsolete in the field. Protocol like 4.0, beyond the visual errata work we're supposed to do and should be doing, is a good use of the working group time and good to do in newer documents. And I just wanted to kick that out and hear what other people think.
And I think you put that on the list as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, if we're using Git and something else, I'm willing to do editorial stuff. So there's clear change control.
And so we do have the Git, we do have a working group Git instance. So I know that I've given kind of control or whatever to a bunch of people. I don't know, Dave, if I've sent you or if I've put your username in there. If you're willing to use Git, I can certainly add you if I have not already, if you're interested in that approach. Go ahead, Dave. You're muted again. Dave, still muted.
Dave, you were muted. We didn't hear you.
My remarks was that I'm willing, but I'm not able right now, and need some sort of tutorial about that.
Chairs will work on that. Okay. All right. I think, Tom, that makes you up. Let me get to your slide deck.
So I've already heard that the word protection types is no good. So we'll go from there. Can we advance to the next slide? So 8435 was really kind of focused on the flex file, which was, separating the metadata from the data and essentially providing pointers from the metadata to the data servers, which was a big step. Next slide, please. And the V2, we're going to focus more on protection types. And by protection types, I mean the client-side mirroring, client-side erasure encoding, and I'd like to also, my vision of this is we can make it generic enough that we could also slide in a Reed Solomon, but I'd need help from the working group to do that.
Can you
Take 3 steps back and explain what you're trying to do?
Yeah, can you expand on on this a little bit more?
I thought I was explaining what I was trying to do. So what? I'm not being facetious. What are you looking for?
So why? So you have an erasure coding approach. Where is the read? I mean, so we know metadata from data is separated. Where do you want to put the Reed Solomon encoding mechanism, the error recovery mechanism, and why?
I want to put it in the protocol such that we can have different implementations of, say, a Reed Solomon interact in the protocol, or different implementations of Mosaic interact.
And that's on the for the, not for the metadata, for the data system,
Yeah.
presumably.
Right.
Okay.
So the responsibility is for the metadata server to hand out a layout that will enable the client to employ the protection algorithm to send the data. Next slide, please. And rather than dive deep into this implementation or this thing, I wanted to bring up 4 issues that I see potentially having causing problems with the working group. Security, all right, because we bypass security all the way in Flex Files V1. How do I encode the protection types? Something I'm going to call the projection header, and then write holes. So I'm going to break those down in the next slides. Security, I honestly threw out KRB5, Kerberos, which was the only thing available when we wrote the first draft, because it was a cluster F. There's just no way to really do it. We could have a per cluster ticket server, but that is a nightmare to do in the first place. So we were looking at TLS because we believe we can extend 4.2 or 4.3 to allow registration of proxy servers in a way that will generically allow TLS to be deployed inside PNFS. All right, not just flex files. Next slide, please. So I guess what I was trying to bring, let's go back. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I haven't seen these since Monday. I didn't realize that. So my whole purpose in bringing up security is to say that we are aware of it for Flex Files v2. We are going to provide a method, and it's just in the pipeline. Next slide, please. So one of the things, so I wrote up the XDR for this, and one of the things that I looked at was, why am I supplying a layout type for Flex Files v2 and not supplying a Mojave layout, a Reed-Solomon layout, a NetApp RAID 6 layout, whatever? And so in essence, we're collapsing all of the protection types into another enum that we're going to have to get an IANA registry for. And we might have to do what we did with layout content 4. And I got someone who said they don't like opaques that are used here, and they want to provide specific information. And as people read the document, I want them to look at the way we encode the protection type and say, am I good with this or am I not good with this? Right? Do I want to see each one of these have their own separate document, their own separate layout type, or do I want to see them all in one as is being presented in the document? Next slide, please. And then we come to what I consider the most contentious part is the Mojave. So the Mojave implementation came from the University of Nantes. It's all out in the public. There is still there's still a GPL version of it available to use. And what it does is it has a payload on top of the data that goes out in each read and write operation. And the problem is this payload is not 4-byte aligned, which means it doesn't go XDR, which means that endiness is an issue. So both the client has to be aware of what the endiness is, but you can still think of this in that reads and writes are opaque anyway. So the client has to agree with the server or the other clients in the endiness of the data in the first place. There's a performance cost to packet in the XDR. I don't know if we care about that. And if we go to the next slide, I will show you that here's the current projection header, which you can see is a bunch of data fields which are packed to be the smallest they can be. So when we look back at the blocks and we look back at the object RFCs, and I couldn't tell whether or not they encoded anything that was data file specific in these in the packets they sent. One of the things right now is I have David Black online, and I was wondering if he recalled that they did anything special for that. All right, I guess not.
Could you repeat the question, Tom? Sorry.
All right, so David, one of the things is we're faced with, we're sending a data file across the wire, and it has a 16-byte header, which is endian, And I was wondering if when the block and the objects protocols were done, were there anything that was like a control block in those things?
No,
No,
not
thank you.
not for block, and I don't care to speak to object.
Okay,
I'm not an expert in object either, but they really didn't. It was XDR or SCSI CDBs.
Thank
sent
you.
over SCSI.
Yeah, what Christoph said. We coded everything up. We coded what we needed up into the XDR. The contents of reads and writes are obviously opaque.
Okay.
Dave, you're still in queue. I think that's leftover. Do you mean to be in queue? Okay. Chris.
You can push people out.
Yeah, yeah, but I wasn't sure if I should because I couldn't remember if he was just leftover. Christoph?
The slides leave me a little confused because I think we're deep diving into assuming we can actually sanely do erasure encoding over NFS and then discuss the details of a pre-existing binary format. I don't know. So I know I talked to Tom a little bit beforehand in person, and I know a few things that not all the working group might know. But so the idea behind is that you want to be able to erasure encode data over a set of data servers, right, with a new layout type. Now, the thing is, if you do data replication, let's not even talk about erasure encoding, which is the advanced version of it. Think of simple 2, 3, 4-way replication, right? Just a RAID 1 in block storage terms. Even for that one, we need to know which of the legs, as we call it, or the different data servers actually has the most up-to-date copies, right? So your client replicates the data, writes it to 2 or more data servers, and you have some kind of power fail event in the meantime. How do you know which of the servers has the most up-to-date version? And how do you ensure that a partial write doesn't erase the previous version and you actually lose your redundancy? And that's something that's doable in distributed protocols, but becomes even harder than just doing it on local-ish storage because the typical ways to do that would be to either lock the data in some also mirrored or redundant lock before writing it back in place. If you want to never lose data, which becomes more important with parity data, it's a bit of overkill for simple replication. Or, for example, what some of the software mirroring drivers do is you keep a bit map that is written out earlier, which is the more up-to-date copy, which doesn't really work very well in distributed systems. Or you always write out of place and have something record which copies have been written, which in many ways fits the PNFS model pretty well because your layout commit would basically tell the MDS where you've written. And all of this becomes similar but more complicated with erasure encoding. So before we're even thinking of detailed layouts, algorithms to use, I think we need to figure out which of these strategies fits into an overall NFS design with what underlying storage protocols to talk to the data servers, because no matter what you're doing, you're not really talking to NFS files as the backend, as in like flex files v1. So even if we're talking NFS XDR over the wire with read and write commands, it's actually something very different than a file system you're talking to underneath. So I think we need to do a lot more architecture work and have a bunch of diagrams showing how these things are actually supposed to work. And how do you do recovery, right? In terms of a power fail event or a storage device failure, who's going to rebuild the data? Who's taking care of scrubbing? I don't know, but those are questions that are.
Yeah, no, those are fair. Those are some of the questions I am
header.
raising here. And, what I found, so BP asked me a question earlier in the week and goes, why NFS? Why is this NFS problem? And one of the things I had to look at was the V1 document. And when it talks about resilvering, it waves its hand. right? And resilvering is exactly the recovery you're talking about, and that was left as an exercise to the reader, right? And I'm trying to get away from that with this document.
No, but again, I think we need to come up with a high-level architecture of how the clients, the MDS, the data servers interact before getting into algorithms and.
I don't disagree with that. Okay? Or I do agree with it. All right, next slide. We already talked about this. Next slide. And so, as Christoph was talking about, write holes are an issue of, there's two ways to get to it. I only talk about one here. One way is two clients write to the same area. How do you know which one is more recent? The other one is we already have data at block N, old data. We write new data at block N, and then something goes wrong. How do we determine which data is up to date? So how do we fix it? What if the client goes down after the writes or during the writes? So basically, this is the recovery portion of what Christoph was just talking about. And I'm not presenting a solution here. I'm just saying that this is something to address.
Okay.
Next slide. Is there any more?
Two more. Well,
Yeah.
more
So
after this.
we need an API. So I like what Christoph said so much, trying to put this into this. We need an architecture on how we will go about this. One more. If you want to talk, you can talk anytime.
No, I'm going to get in line.
Okay.
I'll do it at the end.
And this, again, this is Christoph's idea for staging rights. It's not? So anyway, I thought I actually deleted this slide, so never mind. It surprised me. I'm done.
Sorry, calling out me.
All right. We're waiting for a sprint.
All right, clearly as an individual. You mentioned that you're really kind of unpacking a security model here for Flex files and that it's really lacking in V1. But I think that, I guess, great, thank you. But the flip side of that is also, wow, I think you might be opening a gigantic can of worms. It's not clear to me that you could potentially contain your threat model just to Flex files.
So, that's fair enough, Chris. And that's actually what I struggle with when I look at the security document. To me, the security document is simply whether we have OSSIS or KRV5, right? All the other things I don't put into my threat model. So that's my simple threat model. I want to at least have protection over the wire, and the rest of it is a can of worms.
Okay, I think that's something that collectively the royal we, not necessarily just you, Tom, but we'll have to tackle. For your IANA registry kind of comment about how much is transparent, how much is opaque, does it potentially make sense to have a namespace where there's some kind of flag bit, maybe the upper bit decides public versus potentially a private version? So that you could then say, carve that namespace and say, hey, if this bit is set, then the next so many bits say private enterprise number, and then they can allocate encodings on their own.
We actually do that in the working group in different areas.
It's an option. It's just something to consider. I don't personally have a horse in that race, like, at all. And I would say this from a distributed systems, from a file systems thing, the scariest thing for me for what you're proposing isn't actually a power outage on a node, because then I know that node's fully quiescent, right? The one that scares me is actually a partition, a network partition. And if you have an M of N code, but both partitions can get above whatever that threshold is, can you write divergent writes to those partitions? Because if you diverge, then all bets are off, right? I mean, you will need a human to come in and put the world back
Yeah.
together. That's my lesson. So
What's nice is that human isn't me. Again, as I'm trying to point out, I'm not close to having this publishable. I'm trying to raise awareness and trying to find out what the issues the working group is having with it. And I certainly got that feedback today. I think I'm going to sit down.
yeah, I had to figure out how to get myself out of queue. All right, Christoph, is this for Tom still?
Yeah. I said I was sitting down. Well, you can sit down.
I'm gonna swap slides while
But
this is happening.
yeah, I mean, again, we need to figure out if it's even a good architecture to expose, for example, the erasure encoding algorithm to the client or send the full data to each potential data server and hide it, which would insulate the clients nicely, because the idea of coming up with a number of algorithms that every client needs to understand, and these algorithms tend to have a tendency to change over time because people come up with more optimal ones for certain use cases. It's always been a
So one of
pretty
the
hot topic in storage research if you jumped into, say, Usenix fast proceedings of the last couple of years. So yeah, we need to figure out how to do. I mean, it's a useful thing to have, but I'm very scared of the implications of having every client to be a full participant in basically a distributed storage system.
So one of the things is allowing the response to the layout get is to say that I don't understand that protection type.
But that
Yeah.
doesn't help real interoperability. Yes, it ticks the checkbox. It's not broken, but it doesn't mean you can plug in various clients into various storage systems. I mean,
So, and I'll give you the response that we would provide would be to provide a portal that would map between I can service this type of erasure, this type of replication server, and you speak plain 4.2 to me, I will do the rest for you. There's a performance cost.
maybe.
Yeah.
Dave?
I wanted to generally
Yep.
second Christoph's comment that it's better to have the data protection algorithm be inside the boundary of what you think the storage system is than outside.
Okay.
And now I think the queue's empty.
All right.
Run away while you can.
I will.
Okay. All right, should I go?
You should.
Okay, so these slides are a couple weeks old, and they're about 04, but I think it's appropriate to do them even because nothing, I don't think anything that's happened so far over the next few weeks, over the last few weeks, or in 05 will affect some of these, most of these issues. I'll note if there are some cases. Anyway, next slide. So this is the overview. Is I want to just talk about what the documents now have in slides 3 to 5. We made big changes to the act description, and in my view, they were made necessary by the state of the existing description. And the goal was to provide an entirely new description while retaining compatibility with existing implementation. And also, we included a small set of protocol extensions as described in Section 9 of RFC 8178. And that may be, some of those may be controversial, and I don't think we're prepared to discuss this here, but if they are controversial about those, it's best to address those on the list. Now, I think this is this is in line with this. People have spoke about the need to focus on the consensus issues and in interim meetings, but I prepared this to address that at least partially for a small set of consensus items that I've identified as important to establish direction, and those are in slides 7 through 15. So we'll discuss those. We won't necessarily close on any of those, but I want those out there, and people thinking about whether we have consensus on those issues. Okay, the next slide. All right. Let me tell people what's in these documents. Okay, as part of it, we had to describe ACLs, including their semantics, and unfortunately, in previous things, for reasons that I think BB have explained in the past, basically that wasn't done, and it was necessary to describe the semantics in a way that hadn't been done before. Because of that, I couldn't do a simple clarification of the existing description because there was no semantic description, had to fill that in. And there was an attempt when this was done to accommodate multiple completely different ACL models. It started out in, I think, in RFC 3000, the one before 3530. There was this 5 pages. It was just taken wholly from Windows ACLs. And then later, when 3530 was written, they basically started to deal with the fact that, hey, this wasn't compatible with, like, for example, with Linux servers, and tried to accommodate draft positive ACLs, but they never really did that. And so over time, I figured it was best to provide that semantic basis. Let's go on to the next slide. So a major conceptual restriction in the old specification, 3530, 5661, and 8881, the idea was the NFSV4 model in all of its glory was canonical, and what I call Unix ACLs or draft positive ACLs were just a case of a poor implementation of that. That's the read the document. So I think I changed that to say, well, the core of them is certain mask bits that are close to draft positive ACLs, and everything else is considered an optional extension to that. And that if once you take that step, you have to define some way for, as we have for optional attributes, we have some, or optional operations, have to some way for the client to know what the server supports, and that wasn't there. And so that's why I made this, took the step of adding this new attribute. Now, this is an extension, and I think there's some controversy about this, but I consider this correction of a defect rather than enhancement, although you can describe it either way. But that's why I put it in there, and that's why I think that was the intent, from my point of view, of Section 9 of RFC 8178. And I had tried to do this only in a limited number of cases, and this was one of those. All right, let's go on to the next slide of this set. All right. Okay, you're right. So in addition to that, I felt we need more care in the definition of allowed behavioral variance. And as a result of that, and finally in 05, I had what I call a triage of the models. of which the full NFSV4 model had to close out because there's no time to analyze that in the detail that was. And so basically I focused on getting clear on the core NFSV4 ACL the core Unix ACL model, and those small extensions of that were necessary to support draft POSIX ACLs. All right, so that takes us to that point. Let's go on to the next slide. So this is a tough issue for consensus, but basically felt I had to make, a large set of changes because what we had just wouldn't cut it. So we're allowed to make big changes if we have consensus. And I think we have lagged over time in the process of getting that consensus. So as the consensus items are listed in Appendix A1, and there's about 40 of them now. And of those, I've selected two. One is two tables. Table 9, which I'll cover later, is those that need resolved soon on the list. I think not today, but maybe we should by the next interim meeting. And I also have another list. I've had speak 9, 10. Okay. Number 10 is that list of the that needs to resolve as soon as possible, hopefully by the next interim meeting. So let's go. Let's go on to the first of those. So I'm not sure this is okay. So basically, we had to turn the existence and treat the core Unix ACL model, which is a subset of the draft POSIX ACLs, as the core, and explicitly say that those parts are not optional. If you support ACLs, you have to support at least 3 privilege bits, at least 3 mask bits matching the 3 privileges, and all the other ones became optional. And so that's consensus item number 64. And so I think we should resolve that. And does anyone disagree with that?
Yes. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just terminology, but there is no core Unix ACL model. I mean, from this slide, it seems like you're talking about the mode bits and the basic Unix permission bits, which are really not ACLs in any definition. So, but I don't get your distinction between core Unix ACLs and draft POSIX ACLs.
Well, okay, the difference is that two things that I felt were necessary was the handling of partial satisfactions of ACLs, which is different in the document and in the draft POSIX. And the other thing is, I found out from discussions with Rick, was the default ACL model, and that is not part of. That is something that had to be added.
Sorry, the fallback? I didn't understand you acoustically.
Okay. The semantic difference. If you follow the algorithm that's laid out in that document of how you do it, what happens is, suppose you have, for example, if you have to open a file for read and write, you can have one ACE that says, oh yeah, you can read, and another one you can say write. And that is different from the draft POSIX model, which says, hey, everything has to be satisfied in a single ACL, no partial satisfaction.
I still don't get what your core Unix ACLs are, right? So the traditional Unix permission model is
Mhm.
based around a file having a user and a group ID associated with them. And you have bits for read, write, and execute for the user, the group, and others, where execute also means being able to search in a directory. But it's not an ACL in any of the modern definitions. So
Exactly so.
really not sure where you're getting there.
Okay, but you take one step and move that in the same way that draft positive ACLs do into an ACL model, so that you can say this group has read and this group has write. You're not
And at that point,
not
you're at the
limited to just
draft POSIX ACL in their various slightly different implementations, because the way the last draft, it was just a draft, it was never published, had a bunch of issues, especially with the inheritance in terms of more complicated attributes like the sticky bit or the set UID bit. But basically, the ACL model is slight variations of draft POSIX ACL as implemented by a bunch of Unix versions. There's no core Unix ACLs that are different from the draft POSIX ACL variants.
okay. So let's get that. So we don't have consensus on that, and so I think I will. I don't know. I will try to address that in the next in dash 05. Although I think that needs to be clarified. Okay. Let's go on to the next. If you're okay with that.
Do you want us to?
Okay.
Mike? Yeah.
Now, if you,
No, do you have any more at the mic? Or are you good?
Not right now. There will probably be more later.
Okay.
okay. Now, I think it's like 17. There's AC mask bits defined. Okay, there are 3 that correspond to the POSIX mask bits. And there are a whole set that are finer grain variants of the right bit. You can distinguish for non-directors, you can distinguish writing existing data or extending the file. And for the directors, you can distinguish adding a file, adding a subdirectory, deleting an entry. That was that finer granularity was provided, and that's an extension. That's something that's is not in the core Unix ACL model, or it's not in draft POSIX ACL model, but it is present in the full NFSV4 ACL model. And I think I know of at least one implementation that includes most of those, although it doesn't have the difference in write data. And also, there's another set of ACLs that are sort of finer grain variants, not of a privileged bits, but of the of ownership. There are things saying you can write the ACL, write the owner, write attribute. I don't know about write, but basically the things that go with ownership normally, but in this ACL model, you can deny or allow separately. Now, the existing specs are written assuming that 3 and 4 do not exist, and basically says, okay, everything's okay because these are just all finer grain variants of the 3 bits, but that's not the case, and so we had to deal with that. And also, there were a set of number 4 orphan mask bits that doesn't fit any of those models. For example, ACE4 read attributes, which doesn't seem to me to make much sense, but it's part of the spec, and it's been implemented by at least by one server. So basically, we have to clarify that, and then in ACL choice, we have to provide enough information so the client can figure out if these exist and whether there's anything they can do about them. All right, let's go on. Unless if anyone wants to interrupt.
Queue's empty.
Okay. Okay, 04 is the restructuring that I talked about. So if I have to clarify that one, as I said, as I sort of agreed to do, I have to clarify this one with it. But we may or may not have consensus about that. But I think we need to resolve that by the next meeting, by the next interim meeting, whatever you decide to do with that.
Okay.
Okay, the ACL choice attribute. So, in principle, this is simple. That basically, if something is optional, and in this model, a ton of things are optional, you need some way for the client to figure out what you've done. And I did that via an extension, and I understand that might be controversial, but so that's what I think we need to get consensus on, and we probably don't have it this instant, but you go forward and getting that. I don't think there's much more I can say about the fact of why I think it's necessary. And if you want, if Christoph wants to disagree with that, let's hear him. But I think we will. My view is this is an essential thing.
Well, when you ask for it.
He's coming.
Well, I'll play my favorite party breaker again and figure out it's like, what are we actually trying to do here, right? So if for someone who's just following this meeting, we might be missing that we actually have a very fruitful and active discussion on implementing POSIX draft ACLs for NFS4 on the working group Mail Elias, which is something I'm very happy about. And the question is, what is that effort trying to solve, and what are we trying to solve here with this one? So, and I occasionally look over the document and I keep completely lost in it because I can't figure out what it's actually trying to solve. So if you have a server that exports something that essentially is a Unix file system, that server is much better served by implementing whatever new approach we have of exporting POSIX draft ACLs over the wire. And if not, we actually have that draft that expired long ago from Bruce and Marius that describes the mapping of the POSIX draft ACLs to the NFS4 ACLs, I'd say sufficiently good, including all the problems that it has, right? On the other hand, there actually are a lot of servers that implement a pretty full NFS4 ACL model because they're multi-protocol file servers that serve CIFS as well, and that has a very similar ACL model. The mapping is not entirely perfect, and it might depend on the exact implementation choices, how good the NFS4 ACL is, but implementation is, but I would call it a more or less complete one. So what is the problem statement that we're actually trying to solve here?
Okay. All right. Basically, it was not, as you said, it would have been better back then to implement draft policy, but that didn't happen. And we have this thing, total mess. And what I'm trying to do is clarify that. And that will be most benefit to people who use the NFSV4 acronym, which, for example, ONTAP is one, and it shares a lot of code with the SIP support. But anyway, that summarizes that, and
But
let's go on.
what problem are you? I mean, any existing server and client obviously don't benefit from it without code changes because they need to implement your optional attribute and actually fill it. So any completely existing server is out, right? So once we need to do changes to client and server, what kinds of servers or clients are supposed to benefit from this, and what interaction between clients and servers?
Well, for example, the NFSV4 ACL model gives you the option of having separate bits for writing existing data and extending the file. But that's not usable because there's no way to know whether. So I'm assuming that as right now, that feature is useless. And one thing I try to say is, well, given that it isn't in the spec, we need to have a way to find it. All right.
But why is it useless? It's the same model exists in Windows. The multi-protocol file servers actually support that particular one. And for example, the Linux.
Well, some do and some don't.
What?
Some do support it and some don't.
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's useless. And I mean, if they don't support it, they better reject setting the attribute like anything they don't support, because without that, you'd have a giant security problem even right now. What is the benefit of seeing the attribute versus just failing setting an unknown access control entry?
Well, okay, sorry. But yes, but I thought about that, but given the way the spec is currently written, you have all the these were bad choice, but the spec does not require that, and right now I can't require that because
I'm not saying we can't do it, but you need to clearly write down somewhere what are the problems that are solved, what is the real life problem. And maybe it's there and I'm just being too dismissive, but we need a clear problem statement. And I think I'll leave it at that because we got two other people in the queue. But we need a clear problem statement of what this actually helps with, what interoperability and so on.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I mean, my only real comment was that I don't see this particular, if I understand what this attribute is supposed to do, the ACL choice attribute is supposed to, I guess, describe which ACL models are supported by the server. But I don't really see that as terribly helpful because, if you have a server that has POSIX, that has POSIX ACLs under the hood, then you can have that server present these new attributes, the new POSIX ACL attributes, without having to have this other optional attribute. It just doesn't seem superfluous to me. You don't need because this is all about presenting the ACL to the client, right? We want to be able to allow the client to set and view these things. And if the server doesn't really support POSIX ACLs, it can just not present this attribute. That seems like the simpler approach to me, if I'm understanding this correctly.
BP?
I believe that nothing has changed in 20 years. That in the end, we are going to decide this problem is essentially not solvable in and over the wire protocol for all cases. And like many other areas of NFS over time, it's up to the implementations to map as pragmatically as possible what they can do into the abstract over the wire protocol that NFS defines. The NFS protocol has never defined an actual file system. It is close, but it was never a POSIX file system. It never could handle all of the properties of a local file system. So ACLs are just further along in the difficulty in mapping into a generic client server protocol when you don't know what's on the other end. So the clients and servers, once again, will have to map and make it right. And in the past, when we discussed this, the servers that control the data, when in doubt, security is predominant, and it will reject the request for any data if it can't figure out the ACL. It assumes that it doesn't work. And when we had that discussion long ago, we also said, in reality, nobody in their right mind is going to create extremely complex ACLs that can't be figured out by mere mortals. So we didn't think the problem was going to arise. I just want to caution during the discussions moving forward that we're simply never going to get away from the fact that different file systems, different operating systems will have different flavors of ACL interpretation that will have to be mapped regardless into the NFS version 4 model. And the NFS version 4 model will never resemble, in the end, anybody's ACL definition. At least I don't believe it will. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay. One point is, well, if you're going to do mapping, if the client and server are both going to map, the client needs to know what the server does. And I don't see how they can map.
You misunderstood me. Sorry, I can't raise my hand
Yes.
here. The client and server mapped to the NFS version 4 protocol. That's it. That's all it knows. Client doesn't know anything about the server except what it sees through the V4 protocol. And it maps in and out of that to the best of its behavior. That's always been the way. I feel like the Mandalorian. This is the way.
Want to go to the next slide, Dave, or?
I guess. Okay. This is a detailed matter, but the way the spec is written, renames are treated as deletes and adds from an
It's like cheating, though.
What happened just now? Did we lose people?
Yeah, Dave seems to have dropped. Go ahead, Tom, or sorry, Christoph.
Well, I mean, at least from the Unix file system perspective, renames are at the low level directory always deletes and adds that just happen to work atomically, no matter if they're in the same directory or not. So from that perspective, it's a completely logical model. And unless you have a different access control entry type just for renames, which gets out of hand pretty quickly, how else would you do it? I don't see the problem here.
The problem is, okay, sorry. The problem is that if I don't want if I want to deny people the right to create new files, I don't necessarily want to stop people from renaming them, and that's forced by the current.
It creates a new name. I mean, you might not want them to write to it because you have some out of the NFS standard directory quota, but usually it's so that the user can't use a new name because that name might be hard-coded somewhere else and you create a security problem or something like that. And for that matter, it doesn't matter if you're renaming something into it or it's newly created. So I'm not sure where the problem comes from. I'm not sure why we're creating problems that no one cared about ever.
Okay, let's go on. Okay, I think from what I heard, BP disagrees with this, but I think you have given the importance of security. I understand why it's uncomfortable, but I think you need to define the semantics of these things, and that's my position. And I understand some may not be everyone's. Let's go on. Now, this is the current of how this is described. As I said before, the model, which is not correct, is that all these bits are different variants of different granularity of the three privileged bits. But that's not. But it's not clear or explicit which ones those are, and I've changed that so it is clear which ones are subsets of the right permission. And I think that's just a clarification. Anyway, let's go on. Some people again want to disagree with that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now, I thought I clarified the document roles, but I think I think I will address. I will try to address Christoph's comments in this regard, and maybe at that point we'll revisit this. All right. Now, yes, that is, but as Christoph points out, this is done another way, but there is a need comes from that. If you do that, I think this is a result of some discussion that I've had with Rick and with Chuck. Well, if you set a draft POSIX apples using the new attribute that Rick is in favor and most people are in favor of, you have to be able to read it, or you may be able to read it using the ACL attribute. And for that reason, you need to be able to make draft POSIX ACLs a submodel of NFSV4 ACLs, which they almost were and haven't made. And so that's where I am with that. I know that, I think that's one I think we might be able to get to agreement on, but anyway, that's for another time. So I think that's the end of this deck.
Christoph?
Yeah, trying to present both ACL models for the same file system or even file to the same client, it's just asking for trouble. And maybe that's out of scope for this presentation because it goes into the POSIX draft ACL document, but simultaneously access through both for the same client, I would very strongly advise against. The server might be able to present different models to different clients to preserve backwards compatibility. But doing those, yeah, I'm not sure what we're getting there, and maybe I need to catch up on the email list discussion, but what I just heard sounds dangerous.
Okay, I think that's the end of that deck, and I'm not sure what's next.
So,
All right, here this is, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Okay, this was prepared a couple of weeks ago, and things have changed, and I'll try to accommodate that as they go through the slides. All right. Well, considerable writing has been done, and I think that's still true. The discussion has not lagged as much, and we've had considerable discussion. It hasn't worked out the way I preferred, but we had the discussion. It could be because my drafts are perfect. That should be a smiley, but probably not. In any case, that's a true statement. Well, discussion has not lagged as much, and I think it's been helpful to have this discussion, even though it has not worked the way I would hope. And in my feeling, which I don't think everyone shares, that this respect has to be considered a rescue effort in a number of respects. And anyway, so I said we need working help to either finish this or decide to do something different. So I'm not sure whether there isn't anything to be done differently, but whether what is the alternative to the path I've done. I think we need to. I know we need more specificity about what people object to. Let's go on. All right. Well, I think these slides are why I did what I did, and basically, it appears that I see the world differently than some of the people here. But let me give you my view of it. We had two major issues that were inherited from V4.0. One, international description. This was the thing was that was the result of the ISG intervention in when RFC 3530, and basically for a while we had the situation where we had a spec that clearly defines what was to be done, and nobody had implemented. And that was fixed for 4.0, 7530, but at the time, we didn't know how to, or didn't fix it for 5661 was pretty much based on 3530. And I think handling had never been addressed properly. And I think in the document, there's some major issues. For example, it says that authsys was an optional means of authentication, but it doesn't authenticate anything, and it doesn't give any hint of what the security problems are. So beyond those two major issues, there were a couple of issues that I was aware of, and we had a problem with director related performance, and had my hope for that, and at the time it was implemented in V4.1 was director delegation, but that never been implemented. And I initially thought there was some clarification required, but then I spoke to Rick and some other people, and they proposed some other issues, and I tried to address those. So I think, although again, this is not controversial, but I thought we needed a multi-document model, and with certain areas dealt with NFSV. That's partly because, well, the spec is pretty big, but without doing that, it would be like 800 pages, and it was in danger of turned into a black hole, or at least a neutron star. Let's go on to the next slide. When I started this, I started to read these documents, and then I found how badly the RFC 29 were used, and need to address that. And the effect of the this is BB points out, this is a long tradition, but I think in the case of authorization semantics, I don't think you can deal with security, and I don't see how I could write a threat analysis without basing on the stated authorization semantics. And the problems with the active specifications were way beyond what I expected. No specification of authorization semantics. A lot of work on exceptions that were not usable. And there was a hand wave approach to draft POSIX cycles. And I later found out from Frick that there were specific elements of the draft POSIX just ignored, not even recognized or done. Anyway, I found that there was the features like the persistent reply cache, and I looked at that and I said, how the hell can anyone implement this? And basically, it was unimplementable. So I think I had to address that as well. I didn't want to just say, leave a big hole there saying, well, this is just crap. But I basically tried to clarify this with something that actually could be implemented. And so that was that. Okay, on to the next slide. Now, this is doable from my point of view, and I think I did do this, but I guess we now find that there's some disagreement about that. Well, for analysis, we use the RFC 7530 model, and I think that will go forward, but I think there continues to be some disagreement about whether it is applied to RFC to V4.0, and I don't know how we're going to get to consensus on that issue, but we have to. All right. For security, I took advantage of the fact that our RPC with TLS had allowed us to retain use of auth.sys, which originally people thought we would get rid of. We'll never get rid of auth.sys, but we still have to. So there's a difference between using auth.sys in the clear, which is a nightmare, security nightmare, and using it together with TLS. And so that was why there's a need for a new security document. Okay. A lot of cleanup of the RFC 2119 terms was straightforward, and you can figure out some of the cases where capital should was used really meant, gee, it would really be nice if we did that. An exception was the thing that you said in for the exactly one semantics that you're supposed to wait forever. You can't wait forever. As in the case of Linux, you had to be able to control C, and at the time, the text was wrong in that it told you something was wrong, and that it was a fundamental requirement of the specification, and I changed that. So I think what is said now is both consistent with what people do here and correctly stated. So that's one of the things that was done. What I concluded was that when we do 4.1, we do one major feature and a lot of optional features, including things like directory delegations. And it turns out, and I think it's a fact, that the working group only has bandwidth for one big feature. So a lot of things were missed. And trying to explain how we went through the review process and still let some of the stuff back, and the ISG also went through his process and still let it go through. And so anyway, that goes on to the next slide. Well, director delegations, I thought I've always mentioned it, and the persistent reply cache. So I think I think what's described regarding the persistent with the reply cache could be implemented, but I'm not planning to do it anytime soon. But it is implementable, and it's worth keeping that as an option. Now, ACLs were a nightmare, and the big problem that I faced was that they're wrong in v4.0 and never fixed in v4.1, and therefore you have several decades of history here. And I think that I could do what was necessary from a technical point of view to address that. All right. I know there's disagreement about that, but that's my view. So now I'm just going to go over what's been done in document by document. So in 5661 bis, big things I did was split it into multiple documents. And I know there's some disagreement about that, but I don't think we would want to have an 800-page document. And I think some people, like, for example, Tom, wanted me split further, but I just couldn't see how to do that because the problem is you have all these inter-document references, and we really don't do that. Oh, does Christoph want to say something? In any case,
He's on his way.
Well, the whole splitting document, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, right? And if we look at the two smaller documents kind of circulated, or maybe three, splitting the security considerations out in a standalone document, I think is very useful because it operates at a higher level abstraction than the nitty gritty spec details. That makes a lot of sense. But for example, if we'd actually assume we'd get the BIS document done in time, then doing the internationalization separately actually is kind of counterproductive because yes, it's a tidy, nice little specification, but now I have to read the 800-page one and the nice little small one to actually understand what's going on. And this is kind of a big part of the whole split it up theory. It needs to have reasonable boundaries and not whenever we need to do a change, it's just documented. So until we have that same split, which honestly might be never, not sure what's going to happen there.
well, I don't either, but But thanks for those comments. But anyway, getting back to the slides, which,
So,
okay.
and
So
hey, Dave, can I interject? And Zahed, you might have some familiarity. Do you know what the SIP? I mean, SIP suffered this problem badly, and I don't know. There was a plan to try and, almost give the reader's guide to SIP specs because there was like 100 of them. Do you know how, or should the chairs take a note to try and look at what SIP did in that case? And um, the chair's forcing the AD to dig through his memory and go to the mic.
Doing technical work. Yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, you don't need to go to SIP. You can think about like OAVRTC and stuff like that. And there you have a couple of document that's actually telling you what RTP topology is like it's listing all the things that RTP has done, so that somebody can just read that document and actually understand the terminology and all these things and how they are related to a particular conferencing system, for example. So definitely, I mean, you can have those kind of things. Um, what I'm not sure is like how applicable this would be for, because I think the versions here are quite different. Uh, it's not like an version 4.0 and 4.1 is a little bit an incremental thing. It almost feels like completely different protocol. So in that case, I don't know like how this would be helpful. Uh, we should have just called the Fortran 4.1 a different thing. So this is, I understand like that. I really appreciate here that what Dave is trying to do. But it's a tough job, and I don't know, like I have a better solution. Then I think you guys can have a look at it, like whether this makes sense for you, like the implementers of the protocols. Does it make sense sense to you to actually have such a document to actually guide you to I mean, if you are saying like a lot of new implementers are coming to the, then they will actually get benefit. But if you are already seasoned, you know where to look at. This might be too much. So,
Yep. Brian?
So the document split that Dave implemented was very strongly requested by the former ADs and other people within the IETF. They wanted smaller chunks to swallow of our work than massive documents. Because, and I think this has been playing out well, is that there is a person in the IETF who is an expert on internationalization. And we need feedback on that one area. And we were able to give them a document to feedback on, and they did. There are specific security expertise in the IETF. They don't need to know all the details of NFS version 4. They don't need to plow through that. They would prefer a concise document describing the security concerns and the security implementation definitions within the document. Now, I understand what problem we just created, but we made a decision to do this. And I don't want to unwind this decision personally just to have everybody ask for it again 2 years from now. Okay?
Yeah.
This was not led by the NFS working group. This was requested by the powers that be.
Right. So chair and the co-chair are nodding in agreement. Makes sense. The history is enlightening, and yeah, putting the genie back in the bottle would be hard, and then we'd be asked to let it out again. So, thank you, Christoph.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something pretty similar from a different angle, right? I mean, these little documents for the implementer, they're actually kind of painful, but they are improving the IETF process a lot. That's why the ADs agreed on it. And maybe that was what was needed. And to make progress on this in the IETF, even if it's an inconvenience to the implementers, but that doesn't really address the thing that despite these documents, we still will have a monster document with the 56, 61, 62 BIS document and get into all these pain points too. So I don't know. Do we need to split this further on an actual technical boundary, or do we get through with the monster document once more and hope it's the last time? Or I don't know what the answer is.
Okay, let me respond to that. So I think if the powers that be wants this, we need some support. And one of the things, support that we would need to do this into like set of like documents of 100 or 150 pages would be better support for interdocument references. It's just that would be what I have to say. That would be a requirement to do that if we want to.
Yeah. So to be clear here from I don't know if I guess this is chair comments. I've had conversations with some IESG members and about what it would take for these documents to move. And, the commentary that I've had in my look through the document is if we split them up, would they all be codependent? And if they're all codependent and all we do is cross-reference one another, then they still have to move through at one time, and it does nothing for IESG and other IETF review processes, other than potentially add more boilerplate and other mass to the documents. Even if they don't necessarily have to read that in detail, it's still there. However, the volume of these documents is still pretty overwhelming considering the telechat review size. And yeah, this would be multiple telechat reviews that just, yeah. Right. So as Zahed is commenting, one of our documents is actually more than is handled in a single. It would take 2 telechat reviews to cover one of these documents. It's a real problem. And like I said, I've had some conversations with IESG members about, we're open for suggestions, but we really, the working group doesn't really have a good answer as to how to make it easily manageable. I also think that we're not necessarily within the next, say, 6 months or what have you of having something that we would want to move forward. And so I would want to tighten up the documents before we could, as a chair, I would want to tighten up the material some before we tried to figure out what the solution to it is. Yeah, Zahed, go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, so if you're creating, like, even if you're splitting, you're creating like 300, 400 pages each. This is not gonna solve the problem, right? So also like 800 pages, like is impossible to read and stuff like that. So even if we have like boilerplate and all these things, so that like there is overhead involved, you might actually want to split it into multiple documents from that point of view. But I would like to empower the working group to make a decision. ADs will come, ADs will go. You guys will be working with this document, and I don't think like this is a healthy discussion to have. Like every time it comes up, we discuss the same thing. So why don't we you guys just have a pool, decide on one of the working group, confirm in the mailing group, and I'll just check like whether the decision you're making is making the ITF process right or wrong, rather than you or asking me or any other AD question, what do we do? I mean, this discussion I'm not really understanding that much. We have been discussing. I mean, this discussion I had like four times per year. So I think this is a time. As AD, I'm giving you guys power to run a pool, what to do. Make a decision. Stick to it. I'll tell the ISG like if this makes sense or not.
And I'd like to set up a more fulsome conversation on the list before I ask any kind of detailed questions. So I don't have the right questions as a chair to ask at this moment until we bite into that problem. Yeah. Brian?
Yeah. I actually, I actually think we are where we are, and it would just add a pile of work to reverse direction. I have seen, again, I was going to say, I've seen the split work to our advantage in conversations within the IETF. The refrain, no offense intended to anyone, the refrain from a lot of previous reviews was, I don't understand anything about file systems. I just need to know about the security stuff. Right? That's all I have to look at. And I think this split accomplishes it. But I want to set a milestone, Chris, for 6 months out to ask ourselves whether we've done a sufficient editing job to reduce duplicate material and do the cross references correctly, as Dave says clearly, and make sure that we're not duplicating stuff and that the split is total no more than a single document would be. Okay? So you can write that however you want. I do think we need to do a fierce edit.
Okay. Christoph?
Yeah, so I don't think there's much disagreement to the security split because that works out very well. But to look at the other document where this is kind of acute right now is the internationalization one, which in this shape should be really nicely reviewable for the internationalization experts, and that's a good thing. But if we do the 5661 bis, we basically need to roll it back into that because it contains normative behavior that's really deep to the internals of the protocol and explanations of code points. We can't just keep that separate. That doesn't make sense. So we basically put it out so it passes IETF review, which is good. That needs to happen. Just to roll it back in, which probably isn't too horrible, but it's kind of...
David?
So wanted to offer some clarifications about IETF process. We need to distinguish IESG review from publication. When you've got a bunch of interdependent documents, provided that each doc is at least internally self-coherent, and I'll defer to Christoph's argument that we have a hard time doing that, you can pass them through last call and the IESG separately. The place where the interdependencies come home to roost is when the RFC editor goes to publish them. Now, in that regard, this work group is unlikely to be able to set a record. I think the record is held by the infamous WebRTC tarball of I've forgotten how many drafts. So there is leverage available both for expert review and for spacing out how much has to go through the IESG in one lump from splitting up documents. But the place where dependencies come back is when the RFCs need to be published by the RFC editor.
Yeah, Jahid again, David, you were right. I mean, we can create clusters. In that cluster, the documents move like differently. So that's why I'm saying I'm telling this working group, make a decision, and as long as I'm ready, I'll make it work. But I'm not saying decision unmade. So split it or write one document, do it. I mean, you can write one document like 1,000 pages and we can split it later on. I mean, and run it differently. But I want this work to be done. And please don't put everything on a single editor. Don't do that.
Got it.
Because this is not going to work then anyway. You might, if you split it up, put different editors in the driving phase so that it actually can propagate. Because if everything falls back to one editor, so what's the point of splitting up? Because he or she cannot really write three drafts at the same time. So think about those kind of things and make a decision.
So we're over time. I appreciate everyone sticking with us. Dave, I'm going to give you at least a moment for anyone who's willing to listen to kind of wrap up.
Okay. Well, I don't think it makes sense to go through the remaining 9 slides, but I think people should look at them later. There will be on the web. All right. Okay.
No, keep going, Dave. Don't.
Okay. Anyway, all right. Here's the documents. This is summary of the document status. Okay. Back 1 slide.
No, Dave. I'm just browsing through. I just have to get the chair slide. Time is over. So anything you want to say other than people should look through the slides?
That's really it. So I think I know some. I think we need to make some decisions by the next work to have a discussion on the list and make some more decisions if we can at the next interim meeting.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. One more session left in your IETF, or go enjoy Vancouver, and safe travels home, everybody, for everyone who traveled. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for